She walked into store, tired from life and work, looking for nothing, and heard her husband's voice whispering to another woman. She didn't notice. The loan went through. In that moment, her world shattered. Betrayal, lies, and heartbreak stared her in the face, and nothing would ever be the same. Leila Vance thought she knew everything about her life, her job, her home, her marriage. But one ordinary day, a secret unraveled everything she believed. A betrayal she never saw coming forced her to face the truth, reclaim her strength, and rediscover herself. This is the story of love, lies, and the quiet power of choosing yourself. The hall was glowing with fairy lights, soft music drifting across polished floors, and laughter filling every corner. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, my heart beating fast, my wedding dress heavy yet comforting. I had spent months imagining this day, the smiles, the vows, the first dance with the man I thought I would spend my life with. He appeared, tall and confident, my husband, holding my hand as we moved to the center of the floor. Guests clapped and cheered, their eyes full of joy. I smiled, trying to steady the butterflies that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with anticipation. Then he spoke, and the words cut through the music and laughter like a knife. Asterisk, this dance is for the woman I've loved for 10 years. Asterisk. At first, I froze, my mind looping the sentence, trying to understand, to hope, to convince myself it was a joke. But the way he looked at her, not me, made it impossible to deny. My stomach twisted, and the music became a dull roar in my ears. The woman he held close, smiling back at him, wasn't me. I felt the room tilt, the walls closing in, and a strange numbness washed over me. People around us cheered, clapped, but I only saw them as blurred shadows, strangers in the scene of my own heartbreak. I stepped back, my heels scraping the polished floor. My breath caught. The vows, the promises, the rings, every memory of preparation suddenly felt heavy, tainted. I realized then, with a clarity that was as sharp as it was painful, that love is not always what it seems, and sometimes the person we trust most carries secrets too deep to see. I walked out of the hall slowly, letting the soft music fade behind me. Outside, the night air was cool, calming against the fire that raged inside my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, letting the truth settle around me like a quiet snowfall. It hurt. It would hurt for a long time. But for the first time in years, I felt awake. Not broken. Not betrayed in the way that leaves you helpless, but alert, alive, aware that life doesn't stop when love fails. I took a deep breath, the city lights shimmering in the distance. And then I started walking, step by step, away from the life I thought I had, toward a life I would claim for myself. Because sometimes, the greatest love we can find is the one we give ourselves. I stepped out of the ballroom, my heels echoing softly against the marble floor. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all faded behind me like a dream I no longer belonged to. The cool night air pressed against my face, sharp and cleansing, and for the first time that evening, I could breathe. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I needed to move, to let each step carry me away from the life I thought I had. Streetlights blurred in the rain-slicked streets, reflections dancing like memories I was leaving behind. My phone buzzed in my clutch, a message from my best friend. Asterisk, where are you? Everyone's looking for you. Asterisk, I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed a moment to feel the betrayal, to let it carve space in my chest, not to smother it with words or apologies. I found a small park bench tucked under a lamppost. I sat, the dampness seeping through my dress, and finally let myself feel. The ache was raw, but it was honest. It was proof that I had loved fully, trusted fully, and now I had clarity in return. I replayed the words in my mind. Asterisk, this dance is for the woman I've loved for 10 years. Asterisk, the echo twisted with every memory I had shared with him. The laughter, the late-night talks, the planning of this day. All of it, now shaded with the knowledge that his heart had never truly belonged to me. But amid the storm of hurt, a quiet, steady thought emerged. I am still here. I am still me. No one can take that away. I wiped my tears and pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders. My wedding ring felt heavier than ever, but I let it stay, a reminder not of love lost, but of strength gained. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want anger. I wanted clarity, space, freedom. As I walked back to my apartment that night, the streets were nearly empty. The city lights reflected in puddles at my feet, guiding me like small beacons. I thought about the years ahead. The ones I would live for myself, the ones I would fill with people who see me, truly see me, and moments that carry joy instead of deceit. The next morning, I sat by the window, tea in hand, watching sunlight spill over the rooftops. I didn't pick up my phone. I didn't check the messages from family or friends. I sat with the quiet, letting it speak. And then I wrote. Words poured onto the pages of my journal, unfiltered, honest. Asterisk, I am done hiding. I am done pretending. I am alive, and that is enough. Asterisk. Outside, the world continued its rhythm. Cars humming, birds calling, people rushing to their routines. Inside, I felt the first spark of something I had almost forgotten. Peace. Not happiness yet, not joy fully realized, but the calm before the dawn. And for the first time in years, I knew I could start again. The streets were empty, wet with the evening rain that had passed only minutes before. Leila walked slowly, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, the sound echoing in the quiet night. Her dress, still clinging in places from the damp, felt heavier now, a physical reminder of the weight she carried. Every breath she took seemed to echo in her chest, filling the space left by the sudden emptiness of her heart. She paused under a street lamp, letting its golden light spill across her face, catching the damp strands of hair that had escaped her updo. The city around her moved on, oblivious to the fracture that had just occurred in her life. Cars passed, their tires hissing on the slick roads. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere, music leaked faintly from an apartment. Life was continuing, indifferent, relentless. Leila reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone, hesitating. The messages from her friends and family, frantic and concerned, scrolled endlessly. She didn't open them. Not yet. She wanted this moment to be hers alone. She needed to feel the sting of betrayal fully, to let it settle, to recognize it for what it was before any soothing words or excuses could dilute it. The echo of his voice replayed in her mind. Asterisk, this dance is for the woman I've loved for 10 years. Asterisk, each repetition twisted inside her chest like a silent knife. She remembered the way he smiled at her, not her, but the other woman. The other woman who had somehow, impossibly, taken the place she had built her life around. She moved again, her steps deliberate, carrying herself with a calm she didn't entirely feel. She walked past the cafes still open, the aroma of coffee and pastries brushing past her like a ghost of normal life. She saw a small park bench tucked under a large oak and sank onto it, letting her dress spread around her, the fabric damp and cold. For a long time, she sat in silence. The hum of the city, the distant sounds of life, became her only companions. She let herself remember every small detail of the past months, the subtle signs she had ignored, the fleeting moments where she had felt something was off. She had convinced herself it was stress, a busy week, tiredness. But denial was a slow poison. Her fingers traced the edge of her clutch. Her wedding ring felt impossibly heavy. She rolled her shoulders back and let her head fall forward, the weight of grief pressing her down, yet strangely, she felt the stirrings of clarity. Pain and understanding, she realized, could exist together. They didn't cancel each other out. They coexisted, and in that coexistence, there was something powerful. Night stretched around her, cool and calm. A stray cat brushed against her ankle, looking up at her with unblinking eyes, and she bent to scratch behind its ears. It purred softly, and for a moment, she felt herself exhale a little of the tension she hadn't realized she had been holding. Life continued in its small, tender ways, even amidst heartbreak. Leila thought of the day ahead, of waking up in her apartment alone, the first morning after her marriage's illusions had shattered. She imagined herself making coffee, writing in her journal, stepping into the world not as a betrayed wife, but as someone awake, alert, and capable. The idea was almost foreign, but it excited her. A thrill of independence ran through her, subtle but undeniable. Eventually, she stood, letting her coat fall around her shoulders. The night had cleared, the streets shimmering with reflected light. She began walking, slowly, deliberately, taking in every detail, the patterns of the wet pavement, the faint smell of rain lingering in the air, the soft hum of distant traffic. Each step felt like reclamation. She didn't know where she was going, and she didn't care. For the first time in a long time, she was moving for herself. She wasn't running from him. She wasn't even running from the past. She was moving toward the possibility of life reclaimed, of self restored, of truth embraced. The world was vast, indifferent, and beautiful. And in it, for the first time in years, Leila felt a fragile but undeniable sense of freedom. The betrayal that had once seemed unbearable was no longer a chain. It was a signal, a breaking open, a door she could now choose to step through. She walked on, each step measured, steady, deliberate, letting the rhythm of her own heartbeat guide her through the night. The streetlights cast pools of gold on the pavement, and she felt, in some small, essential way, that she could finally see herself clearly again. Not as someone wronged, not as someone lost, but as someone who had survived, who had felt, and who had begun to reclaim her life, piece by deliberate piece. The night air began to thin, the first hints of dawn softening the edges of the city. Leila walked without urgency, letting the rhythm of her steps match the slow, steadying pulse of her thoughts. She had never been alone like this, truly alone, unguarded, untethered from expectations or obligations. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. She passed the small corner cafe she had often ignored, the warm glow of its lights spilling into the empty street. A memory rose unbidden, the countless mornings she had rushed past, preoccupied with work, life, the illusion of routine. She paused, peeking inside, seeing the few early risers sipping coffee, quietly conversing, absorbed in their own worlds. A part of her envied them, the simplicity of being fully present in a small, ordinary moment. Something inside her stirred. She pushed the door open, the bell chiming softly. The scent of coffee, baked bread, and cinnamon immediately wrapped around her, grounding her. She chose a table by the window, the one where sunlight would soon filter through, imagining that tomorrow it would. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to think about the life she had envisioned before the betrayal. The dinners, the laughter, the shared dreams, they were gone, but not without leaving lessons. She had believed love was enough. She had believed trust could endure silence. And now, she understood. She had been living half awake, letting the smallest cracks go unnoticed. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. She felt her chest expand slightly, as if she were claiming space she had long ignored. The betrayal was sharp, yes, but the clarity it brought was sharper still.
She would not be broken by this.
Not truly. She would honor the pain, but she would not be defined by it. Minutes turned into an hour. She opened her journal, the pages blank yet inviting. Words flowed hesitantly at first, then with increasing confidence. She wrote of anger and disbelief, of sorrow and betrayal. But then, she began to write of herself, the woman who had been quietly buried under obligations and love given freely. She wrote of her resilience, her capacity to endure, her right to reclaim joy. A man entered the cafe, quiet, polite, the kind of presence that neither demanded attention nor shrank from it. He glanced her way and smiled briefly, a recognition, maybe, of another solitary soul finding a moment of refuge. She returned the smile, small but genuine. It wasn't desire, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of life moving forward, of connection possible beyond heartbreak. Leila lingered in the cafe until the sun had fully risen, painting the streets in pale gold. When she stepped outside again, the city seemed softer, warmer, less like an obstacle and more like a companion. Each step carried a sense of purpose she had almost forgotten existed. She wasn't running. She wasn't escaping. She was walking deliberately, fully, into her own life. The betrayal would not vanish. It would live in memory, as all truths do. But she could shape her response. She could decide what to carry forward and what to leave behind. She would not speak to him yet. She would not confront immediately. First, she would rebuild the fortress of herself, brick by brick, thought by thought, heart by heart. As she turned down a quiet street, she saw a small bookstore, its windows fogged, its interior dim but inviting. Something drew her in, the scent of paper, ink, and age wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She wandered among the shelves, running her fingers over spines, feeling the weight of countless stories, each one a testament to survival, love, loss, and discovery. She realized, with a sudden clarity, that her own story was still being written. She held the pen in her own hands now. Hours later, she returned home. The apartment, once heavy with the echoes of the past, felt neutral, even promising. She placed her coat on the chair, removed her shoes, and walked to the window. The city sprawled below her, alive, indifferent, waiting. She poured herself a glass of water, letting the liquid remind her that she was alive, that she had endured, that she had claimed a moment of calm amidst chaos. That evening, she sat with her journal again. She wrote not of him, not of the betrayal, but of herself. Of what she wanted, of what she could imagine, of the life she would build from the pieces left behind. Each word strengthened her, each thought solidified her. She no longer felt like a woman defined by loss. She felt like a woman awakening to possibility. She paused, pen in hand, and looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back was familiar and new all at once. There was no anger, no despair. Only a quiet determination, the kind that comes from surviving a storm, and the next morning arrived pale and quiet, as if the world itself was giving her space to breathe. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the walls with gentle strokes of gold. Leila lay still for a few moments, letting the calm settle around her like a soft blanket. The apartment felt different. Not empty, not heavy, but neutral, like a blank page ready for the next chapter. She dressed slowly, choosing clothes that made her feel grounded rather than adorned for anyone else. Her old green coat, faded and soft, hugged her shoulders. She felt the weight of it differently now, not as a burden, but as a comfort, a piece of herself reclaimed. She left the apartment without turning back, the city waking around her, streets humming softly with morning routines. At the train station, she bought a ticket to nowhere in particular. She didn't need a destination. She needed motion, a reminder that she could go anywhere, be anyone, and that the world would continue to turn. The train rattled beneath her feet, the steady rhythm soothing. She watched the buildings blur past, each one a testament to life, continuing despite heartbreak, loss, and mistakes. She opened her journal again, flipping to a blank page. Words spilled out, not anger, not sorrow, but possibility. She wrote of herself, of her life, of the strength she had found in the quiet aftermath of betrayal. Her pen moved faster than her thoughts, a release she hadn't realized she needed. For the first time in years, she wrote for herself and no one else. The train slowed, and she stepped off at a small stop she had never noticed before. A cobblestone street led her into a neighborhood she had only ever passed through in haste. Small cafes, bookstores, and galleries lined the way. People moved through their routines, faces soft with familiarity. She watched without judgment, noticing small gestures, a mother holding her child's hand, an elderly man feeding pigeons, a young couple laughing over coffee. The world was alive, rich and ordinary, and she felt, for the first time, fully present. Leila wandered into a small co-working space she had signed up for months ago, but never visited. Inside, soft sunlight filled the room, illuminating desks scattered with laptops and notebooks. A workshop was underway, but she didn't attend immediately. She found a desk by the window and sat, letting herself watch the people around her, absorbing the quiet energy of creation. Eventually, she opened her laptop and began writing. She sketched ideas she had long ignored, thoughts of projects she had abandoned, dreams dismissed as unreachable. Hours passed unnoticed. The soft hum of conversation, the tapping of keyboards, the low murmur of ideas being born, it all felt alive, invigorating. She realized that life had given her a second chance, not by removing the pain, but by showing her that she could move forward anyway. When she left, it was evening. The streets glowed with warm lights, the scent of freshly baked bread and roasted coffee drifting through the air. She walked slowly, savoring each moment, noticing things she had never seen before, the way a stray cat paused on a fence, the gentle curve of a shop sign, the shimmer of reflections on the wet pavement. A man held the door open for her at a small cafe, his coat too large, smile careful but genuine. She returned it with a small nod, not because she sought attention, but because she felt capable of connection again. It was subtle, but in that tiny gesture, she recognized herself, someone who could move through the world without fear, without apology, fully present. Back at home, she made herself tea and sat by the window. The apartment felt warmer now, infused with her presence rather than memories of him. She opened her journal, writing again, this time reflecting on the day's small discoveries, the quiet triumphs of being fully alive in the world for herself. That night, she didn't dwell on the betrayal. She didn't listen to his voice in her mind. Instead, she listened to the soft hum of the city, the distant laughter of children, the patter of raindrops beginning anew. She realized that healing wasn't a sudden act. It was slow, deliberate, and ongoing. But it was hers entirely. Leila closed her journal, sipped her tea, and smiled. The night stretched wide, open, and full of possibility. She understood, in that moment, that life had not ended with the truth about him. It had begun for her. And she was ready to meet it, step by step, fully awake, fully herself. Her journal was open before her, the pages filled with reflections, sketches, and fragments of thought she had collected over the past week. She wrote of the betrayal, of pain, of the freedom she was beginning to feel. But she also wrote of hope, not naive hope, not the kind built on others' promises, but the quiet, steady hope of someone rediscovering the power of their own life. After breakfast, she wandered into a nearby park, letting the warmth of the sun on her shoulders ground her. She walked along familiar paths she had never truly seen before, noticing the curve of the benches, the way light played on the leaves, the laughter of children echoing faintly across the grass. Life continued in its ordinary rhythm, yet for her, it felt extraordinary. A few weeks passed. Each day, Leila allowed herself to explore the city further, to take risks she had once been too cautious to consider. She attended workshops she had signed up for months before, but had ignored. She met people who inspired her, listened to ideas she had long abandoned, and slowly, the fragments of the woman she had once been began to weave themselves back together. One afternoon, she stumbled upon a small art gallery tucked between two larger buildings. Its windows displayed paintings of city streets, rain-soaked and glowing, abstract yet familiar. Inside, she moved from canvas to canvas, running her fingers along the frames, letting the colors and textures speak to her. She felt a thrill she had almost forgotten, the pulse of curiosity, the hunger to experience, to live. A woman working at the gallery noticed her interest and struck up a conversation. Her voice was warm, unassuming, and the dialogue flowed easily. For the first time, Leila realized she could connect with someone without pretense, without obligation. The conversation left her lighter than she had felt in months. Back at her apartment that evening, she made herself dinner for one, savoring each bite. The apartment, once heavy with echoes of betrayal, now felt spacious, infused with possibility. She sat by the window afterward, tea in hand, watching the city lights reflect in the puddles on the street below. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow. I have something important to show you." Leila didn't respond immediately. She let the message sit, her mind calm, her heart steady. Whoever it was, whatever they wanted, she knew she could meet it with clarity rather than fear. She placed the phone aside and opened her journal, writing the last few lines of reflection. Asterisk, I am no longer a victim of my past. I am awake. I am alive. I am moving forward. Asterisk. Night fell, soft and quiet. She closed her journal, the room bathed in the gentle glow of her lamp. The air smelled faintly of rain, cool and cleansing. Leila lay down, the weight of the past slowly lifting from her chest. For the first time in a long time, she slept not in anxiety or heartbreak, but in quiet certainty that tomorrow, and every day after, belonged entirely to her. The next morning dawned quiet, almost sacred, the kind of morning that feels like the world is holding its breath. Leila lingered at the window, watching the first streaks of light spill over rooftops. She noticed the details she had never truly seen: the curve of the fire escapes, the way the sunlight caught on glass, the delicate flutter of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Life, she realized, was happening in every small detail she had once ignored. She dressed slowly, deliberately, choosing soft layers that allowed her to move freely. Her coat, still slightly damp from the previous day's rain, hugged her shoulders with a familiar comfort. Today, she would walk without urgency, letting the city guide her rather than rushing through it. Each step outside felt like a declaration. She was reclaiming her life, piece by piece. The streets were awakening. Shopkeepers raised shutters, the aroma of fresh bread drifted from bakeries, and the distant sound of children laughing echoed faintly through alleyways. She stopped for a moment, closing her eyes, letting the smells and sounds sink in. Even in the mundane rhythms of life, she could feel a pulse of possibility. She inhaled deeply and continued walking, slower now, noticing the way puddles reflected the sky, the fluttering leaves caught in early wind, the soft brush of air against her cheeks. Hours passed as she wandered, exploring streets she had once ignored, cafes she had never entered, bookstores she had overlooked. She stopped in front of a small second-hand bookstore, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. Something drew her in: curiosity, instinct, or perhaps the quiet need to feel grounded in a space untouched by the chaos of her past. Inside, the smell of old pages and faint perfume wrapped around her. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with worn spines, each holding countless stories of lives lived, mistakes made, love lost, and love found. Leila wandered slowly, brushing her fingers over the books, feeling the weight of their histories. She paused at a collection of journals, small leather-bound volumes, their pages yellowed with age. She traced her fingers over them, thinking of her own journal waiting at home, the blank pages calling her to fill them with her reclaimed life. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Looking for anything in particular? She turned to see a man, probably in his 30s, with a gentle smile and eyes that reflected quiet intelligence. "Not really," she said softly, almost apologetically. "Just browsing." He nodded, sensing her hesitation. "Sometimes browsing is better than searching," he said. "You find things you didn't know you were looking for." Leila smiled faintly. There was something in his tone, a patient understanding, that made her feel safe to simply exist in the space. She continued wandering, occasionally exchanging small words with him, and for the first time, she felt the lightness of human connection without expectation or obligation. By late afternoon, she stepped out into the streets again. The sunlight had shifted, turning golden, soft, warm. She stopped at a small cafe, drawn by the smell of roasted coffee and the gentle hum of conversation. The cafe was small, intimate, with a few tables scattered across a polished wooden floor. She chose a seat by the window, ordered tea, and watched the world pass. Each person outside became a story to her. A mother wrangling a restless child, a man carrying a briefcase and humming softly, an elderly woman walking her dog with measured steps. She began to imagine their lives, the choices they made, the loves they had known. It was not intrusive, it was restorative. She felt alive in her observation, finding solace in connection without intrusion. She opened her journal, letting the words flow. At first, it was stream of consciousness, fragments of thought, half-finished sentences, sketches of ideas. Then, gradually, it became deliberate, reflections on the betrayal, lessons learned, plans for her life ahead. She wrote of independence, of freedom, of the quiet strength that had been building inside her, unnoticed until now. Hours passed unnoticed. The sky outside turned a deep blue, streaked with fading gold. The cafe lights glowed warmly. She sipped her tea, savoring the silence, the solitude, the reclamation of her mind and heart. When she finally left, the streets were cool and quiet, illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. She walked slowly, letting each step be measured, deliberate. She noticed small details, the way the rainwater reflected the lamps, the gentle curve of the cobblestones, the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Life, she realized, was a mosaic of small, perfect moments. Back at her apartment, she made herself a simple dinner, letting the act of feeding herself be deliberate, mindful, almost ritualistic. She sat by the window afterward, tea in hand, writing again, reflecting on the day, on the city, on herself. She thought briefly of Marcus, of the betrayal, of the lies, but the thought no longer carried power over her. It was a memory, not a weight. She understood now that life continued regardless of heartbreak, and that she could step into it fully, awake and aware. Night came. She closed her journal and turned off the lights, lying in bed with the soft hum of the city outside. Sleep came slowly, but not in torment. She breathed deeply, feeling the quiet pulse of her own existence, a steady rhythm that belonged entirely to her. The next morning, Leila awoke to the sound of distant church bells mingling with the hum of early traffic. She lingered in bed, letting the quiet stretch, savoring the sensation of a day untouched by obligations or expectations. Slowly, deliberately, she rose, drawing the curtains to let sunlight spill across the room. The soft gold lit her apartment like a stage set, highlighting spaces she had once ignored. The small scratches on the wooden floor, the way light reflected off the glass of her bookshelf, the faded fabric of her old green coat draped over a chair. She dressed in layers that allowed her to move freely, a soft sweater, jeans that fit comfortably, and her coat. Today, she didn't rush. Each step out of her apartment felt measured, intentional. The city was quiet in this early hour, streets glimmering faintly from the previous night's rain. She walked slowly, letting the air fill her lungs with freshness, noticing the details she had once ignored, the curve of wrought iron fences, the small flowers growing in sidewalk cracks, the soft clatter of a shop shutter opening. Leila stopped by a small bakery she had never entered before. The smell of bread, cinnamon, and roasting coffee drew her inside. She ordered a pastry and tea, choosing a corner seat with a view of the street. Outside, people passed, mothers with children, men with briefcases, strangers whose faces told stories she could only imagine. She let herself watch, silently, savoring each fleeting moment. Life moved around her, yet she felt separate from it, steady and present in her own rhythm. Pulling her journal from her bag, she began to write. Words flowed slowly at first, fragmented, hesitant, but gradually became deliberate, confident. She wrote of yesterday, of the cafe, of the bookstore, of moments that had reminded her she could exist fully in her own skin. She wrote of Marcus, not in anger, but as a memory she had acknowledged and released. Each sentence was a brick in the quiet fortress she was building around herself, one that no betrayal could dismantle. After breakfast, she wandered further into the city, letting her instincts guide her. She discovered a small park tucked between two streets, its trees ancient and quiet. She paused to watch the leaves flutter in the breeze, the soft shadows cast on the ground, the way sunlight filtered through branches to create shifting patterns. For a long time, she simply sat on a bench, observing, breathing, feeling the pulse of life in its quiet rhythm. A man walked his dog nearby, pausing occasionally to call the animal back when it wandered too far. Their eyes met briefly, and he smiled politely. Leila returned the gesture, small, restrained, but genuine. She realized she no longer feared the presence of others. Connection no longer demanded dependence. It was a subtle, yet profound freedom. By afternoon, she found herself at a small art gallery she had passed countless times. The paintings depicted city streets in rain, abstract emotions in vibrant colors, portraits that seemed to capture fleeting glances of human life. She wandered slowly, tracing her fingers along the edges of frames, letting colors and textures evoke feelings long buried. A gallery attendant, a young woman with keen eyes, struck up a conversation about a painting of a stormy harbor. Leila listened, contributing cautiously at first, then more openly as the discussion deepened. The dialogue left her lighter, reminding her that engagement with the world could be gentle, fulfilling, and unpressured. Evening fell, turning the city golden. Leila walked through streets she had once ignored, letting the reflections in puddles, the laughter of passing strangers, and the glow of shop lights seep into her. She paused at a cafe she had frequented only once before, ordering tea, choosing a seat near the window. The world outside moved in its usual rhythm, yet she observed it as if for the first time, fully awake to life's small moments. Her journal, open on the table, began to fill with reflections on the day, small sketches, fragments of future plans. She wrote of freedom, of hope, of the deliberate reclamation of her life. Each sentence strengthened her, each thought solidified her determination to move forward. When she returned home that night, she prepared a simple dinner, savoring each bite. Her apartment felt lighter, infused with her presence rather than memories of betrayal. Sitting by the window afterward, she reflected on the journey she had begun, the slow, deliberate steps that had carried her from heartbreak to awakening. As night deepened, she wrote again in her journal, planning not just the immediate future, but imagining herself months ahead, confident, independent, capable of living fully without dependence on anyone else's approval. She closed the journal with a quiet satisfaction, feeling the pulse of life in her chest. Sleep came slowly but peacefully. For the first time in months, her dreams were untroubled by shadows or whispered betrayals. She dreamed instead of open streets, sunlit parks, and laughter. She could give herself freely. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains in gentle streaks, warming the apartment with quiet insistence. Leila stretched slowly, savoring the ease of movement that had once been foreign to her. There was no urgency today, no deadlines, no obligations pressing down, only the rhythm of her own life, finally her own. She dressed with care, choosing soft fabrics and muted colors, her green coat draped across her shoulders like a familiar companion. Each layer was deliberate, a small ritual of self-respect and presence. Before stepping outside, she paused by the window, watching the city awaken. The hum of engines, distant laughter, and soft bell chimes from a nearby clock tower combined into a melody she had never noticed, the soundtrack of a world she had ignored in the past. Her footsteps carried her slowly through streets she had always hurried past. She noticed small miracles everywhere, a flower sprouting between cracks in the sidewalk, the delicate tilt of a street lamp casting long shadows, a pigeon pecking gently at breadcrumbs with patient persistence. Life was happening quietly around her, and she was finally present enough to witness it. She found herself drawn to a small park she had overlooked countless times. The gates creaked softly as she pushed them open. The air smelled faintly of dew, grass, and distant flowers. Children laughed in the distance, chasing one another in games she remembered from her own youth, but had long forgotten. She walked slowly along winding paths, letting the soft crunch of gravel under her feet anchor her. At a bench beneath an old oak, she paused, letting the serenity seep into her bones. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply, listening to the rustle of leaves, the distant bark of a dog, the gentle murmur of the city beyond the park's boundaries. In that quiet, she felt something settle, a sense of possibility, of strength, of life continuing beyond pain. A man with a sketchbook sat nearby, shading softly on the page, entirely absorbed in his work. He glanced up briefly, smiled politely, then returned to his drawing. Leila noticed the gentle precision of his movements, the way his focus transformed the blank paper into something alive. She realized that she had missed this, the act of quiet creation, the flow of attention poured into something meaningful. She wandered further, finding a small cafe tucked behind ivy-covered walls. Its windows glowed with warm light, and the scent of roasted coffee and fresh bread beckoned her inside. She chose a table by the window, ordering a simple tea and a slice of almond cake. Watching the world outside, she let her mind drift. People passed in quiet arcs, couples, office workers, children with their mothers. She imagined their lives briefly, weaving small stories in her mind, enjoying the sense of connection without intrusion. Leila opened her journal and wrote. At first, the words were hesitant, fragments of thought, small reflections on the day. But soon, sentences flowed with ease, observations of the city, sketches of ideas for writing, plans for the future. She wrote of freedom, independence, and quiet strength. She wrote about the lessons learned from betrayal, not in bitterness, but in clarity. Each word built a structure of resilience, a foundation she could rely on. Hours passed unnoticed. The sun shifted, painting the cafe in deep amber. She sipped her tea slowly, letting the warmth ground her. When she finally left, the streets were golden, the evening light softening every corner. She walked without hurry, feeling the gentle pulse of life beneath her feet, the rhythm of the city in harmony with her own. Returning home, she cooked herself a simple dinner, enjoying the act as a meditation. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. Afterwards, she sat by the window, tea in hand, reflecting on the journey she had begun. The apartment, once heavy with memories of betrayal, now felt expansive, welcoming her presence rather than reminding her of absence. Night settled, and she prepared for sleep. The city's distant hum was soft, almost comforting, blending with the gentle rustle of the curtains. She opened her journal one last time, writing not about what she had lost, but about what she was gaining: self-awareness, strength, and a life lived intentionally. Closing it, she felt the quiet certainty that tomorrow, and every day after, belonged to her. Sleep came slowly, yet peacefully. In her dreams, the city streets were alive, filled with people moving in gentle arcs, each interaction a quiet testament to life's continuity. She walked among them freely, unburdened, fully awake even in the haze of dreams. The next morning, the city seemed quieter than usual, almost hushed, as if waiting for something new to begin. Leila awoke with the lingering warmth of sleep, stretching her arms and feeling the faint ache of muscles relaxed after a week of long walks and careful movement. She lingered in bed a few moments longer than usual, allowing herself the luxury of time, something she had not afforded herself in years. After a slow shower, she dressed in muted earth tones, soft fabrics that moved with her body rather than constraining it. Her green coat, now slightly frayed at the edges but comforting in its familiarity, draped over her shoulders like an old friend. She paused at the window, watching as the early sunlight painted the buildings in gentle gold, catching on brick, glass, and puddles lingering from the night's rain. For the first time, she noticed these details not out of habit, but with quiet reverence. Walking down her street, she felt the rhythm of her own steps, deliberate, unhurried, grounded. Every sound was sharp and alive: the faint hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the soft cooing of pigeons, the distant ringing of a bell. She stopped for a moment at a small flower shop she had passed countless times. The petals glowed in the morning light, a riot of reds, yellows, and purples. She inhaled deeply, letting the floral scent fill her chest, and felt herself breathing for the first time in months. She entered the shop. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, greeted her with a nod and soft smile. "Looking for something special?" the woman asked. Leila hesitated. "Just a reminder," she said softly. "A reminder that beauty still exists." The woman's smile widened, understanding more than her words conveyed. Leila wandered slowly, fingers brushing against petals, feeling the texture, the life in each bloom. She finally chose a small potted plant with delicate white blossoms. She carried it with her like a talisman, a reminder that she could nurture something, even herself, and watch it grow. From there, she wandered through winding streets she had never fully explored. She paused at a small gallery tucked into a corner between two cafes. Its windows were streaked with condensation from the morning chill, but inside, the light was warm. Paintings of stormy seas, abstract cityscapes, and human figures caught in motion drew her in. She lingered, studying each brushstroke, imagining the stories behind them. A young man approached, noticing her interest. "Do you paint?" he asked, gesturing at her notebook she had brought along. "Not exactly," she said, smiling faintly. "I write, and sometimes sketch." He nodded, intrigued. "There's a rhythm in both. Words and lines. They tell stories the world otherwise ignores." For a few minutes, they spoke quietly about art, life, and the unspoken struggles everyone carries. Leila listened, realizing that connection could exist without expectation or need. She could share space, exchange ideas, and still remain entirely herself. By late afternoon, she returned to her favorite cafe, sitting at the corner table by the window. She ordered tea, watching as the city moved beyond the glass. People hurried past, conversations drifted in the air, the soft hum of engines and footsteps forming a melody she had once ignored. She pulled out her journal and wrote, detailing her morning, her observations, her thoughts. Each word was deliberate, each sentence a small act of reclaiming herself. The sun began to dip lower, painting the streets gold and amber. Leila walked slowly home, savoring the long shadows and the way light reflected in puddles. She paused occasionally, letting the cool air brush her face, feeling alive in each moment. Back at her apartment, she prepared a simple dinner, enjoying the process as if it were a ritual. She ate slowly, noting the taste of each bite, the warmth of the plate in her hands. Afterwards, she sat by the window with her tea, her journal open. She wrote not only about the day's events but about her aspirations, travels she had postponed, stories she had yet to tell, sketches waiting to be completed. Night fell, soft and quiet, and the city hummed gently outside. Leila closed her journal, feeling the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. For the first time in months, she slept without the shadow of past betrayals pressing upon her, her dreams filled with movement, exploration, and possibility rather than anxiety or sorrow. The morning light seeped softly through her curtains, dust motes dancing lazily in its glow. Leila awoke slowly, savoring the absence of urgency. There were no obligations today beyond the simple rhythm of her own life. She stretched, feeling the gentle ache of muscles loosened by long walks and quiet moments of reflection. She dressed with care, a soft beige sweater, worn jeans, and her green coat draped over her shoulders. It was slightly frayed at the edges, but comforting, like an old friend. She paused at the window, watching the city awaken, the faint hum of engines, the chatter of early pedestrians, the distant chime of a church bell. Every sound was sharp, every detail alive. She had never noticed the city in this way before. Leila left her apartment without plan or destination, letting her instincts guide her. She wandered down streets she had passed 1,000 times, noticing for the first time the subtle beauty in the ordinary. Ivy crawling along brick walls, cracks in the pavement filled with tiny blooms, sunlight glinting off a puddle that reflected the sky like liquid glass. Each step grounded her, made her feel present in a world she had been running through without seeing. She stopped at a small flower shop she had often ignored. The air inside smelled of earth and petals, warm and gentle. The elderly shopkeeper greeted her with a kind nod. "Looking for something to brighten your day?" she asked. Leila hesitated. "Just a reminder that beauty still exists," she replied softly. The woman's eyes softened. Leila wandered among the flowers, letting her fingers brush petals and leaves. She finally chose a small potted plant with delicate white blossoms, cradling it as she left the shop. It was more than a plant. It was a symbol, a small act of care she allowed herself, a tangible reminder of life growing anew. She wandered further, discovering a narrow alleyway lined with small, quaint shops. The windows displayed handmade jewelry, vintage clothing, and books whose spines had grown soft with age. She entered a second-hand bookstore, the scent of old pages mingling with faint perfume. She ran her fingers along the shelves, feeling the history of countless lives folded between the pages. A young man, sitting at a small desk, noticed her interest. "Looking for anything specific?" he asked. "No," she said, smiling faintly. "Just seeing what's here." "Sometimes the best stories aren't the ones we seek," he said. "They find us instead." Leila nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She wandered through the aisles slowly, running her fingers over worn leather covers, opening books to read random passages. Every word seemed to breathe life into her quiet, reshaping her understanding of herself and the world. Hours passed unnoticed. When she finally stepped outside, the sun had shifted, casting long golden streaks across the city. She paused at a cafe, ordering tea, and settled by the window. She watched the city move, couples walking hand in hand, office workers hurrying past, children chasing one another with joyful abandon. She imagined their lives briefly, not to judge, but to feel connected to something larger than herself. Her journal, resting open on the table, filled with observations, reflections, and sketches. She wrote of the small victories of the day, noticing beauty, connecting with strangers, embracing her independence. She wrote of Marcus not with bitterness, but as a chapter that had ended, acknowledged and released. Each word built her strength, a quiet fortress of resilience and self-possession. As evening fell, Leila walked home slowly, savoring the soft amber glow of streetlights and the reflections in puddles. She paused occasionally, letting the cool air brush against her skin, feeling alive with each breath. Her apartment welcomed her back like an old, faithful companion. She cooked a simple dinner, savoring each bite, and afterwards sat by the window with tea, reflecting on the journey she had begun. Nights settled around her. She opened her journal one last time, writing not about what she had lost, but about what she was gaining: clarity, independence, and the quiet assurance that her life belonged to her alone. Closing it, she felt the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. For the first time in months, she slept without shadows pressing on her chest, her dreams filled with movement, exploration, and possibility. Leila woke before dawn, the faint glow of the city just beginning to filter through her curtains, casting long, uneven lines across the floorboards of her apartment. She lingered in bed for a moment, the mattress yielding to her weight like it had grown accustomed to her presence over the years, supporting her quietly without demand or judgment. The silence of the apartment was profound, almost sacred, filled with the echo of life moving slowly in the distance, a car sputtering on the street below, the soft, rhythmic footfall of someone walking a dog, the faint clang of a bicycle chain somewhere nearby. She closed her eyes and let the sounds settle over her like a blanket, feeling the pulse of the city enter her lungs and fill her chest, reminding her that she was alive and that the rhythm of life was hers to join on her own terms. Her mind drifted for a moment to the last weeks, to the long days filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and the quiet reclamation of herself. She remembered how Marcus's voice had sounded in that boutique, low and confident, masking deceit with charm, and how each syllable had carved itself into her consciousness like a warning she could no longer ignore. She thought of the recording, now deleted, and the strange, liberating silence that replaced it, the kind of silence that is not empty, but full, waiting for something new to be born within it. Rising slowly, she stretched her arms above her head, feeling the faint tension in her shoulders and back, tension that had accumulated over months, years, of walking through life half-present, carrying weight she had not realized she had allowed herself to bear. She walked to the window and opened it, letting the cool morning air brush her face. The air smelled faintly of rain, earth, and the distant aroma of freshly baked bread from a shop she had passed countless times but had never noticed. For a moment, she just stood there, inhaling, feeling her chest expand, her lungs fill with possibility. She dressed carefully, choosing soft fabrics that moved easily over her skin, her green coat, slightly worn, but comforting, draped over her shoulders. She paused to glance at herself in the mirror, noticing the subtle changes in her expression. Calmness replacing anxiety, alertness replacing fatigue, a quiet confidence taking the place of the doubt that had clung to her for so long. As she stepped outside, the city unfolded in a symphony of motion and stillness, each sound, color, and texture imbued with a clarity she had not known existed. She walked slowly, deliberately, savoring every sensation. The crunch of gravel beneath her feet, the faint hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the scent of flowers and damp earth that lingered in the alleyways. She noticed details she had never paused to see, the way ivy curled along brick walls, the shimmer of sunlight on puddles reflecting the sky, the tilt of street lamps casting long, dancing shadows. Each observation was a small triumph, a reclaiming of the present moment, a quiet proof that she had returned to herself. She paused at a flower shop, entering and letting the warm air and fragrance envelop her. The elderly shopkeeper greeted her with a nod, eyes kind and knowing, as though she understood without words. Leila wandered among the blooms, letting her fingers brush petals and leaves, lingering over colors that seemed impossibly vivid against the muted city streets outside. She chose a small potted plant with delicate white blossoms, cradling it as though it were a piece of herself that she had been allowed to nurture again. With the plant under her arm, she continued wandering, letting the city guide her, discovering new streets, small galleries, quiet cafes, and hidden parks, each place a canvas upon which she could trace the outlines of her renewed life. By mid-morning, she found herself in a narrow alleyway she had never noticed before, lined with small, eclectic shops whose windows displayed objects that spoke of lives lived fully, even quietly. There were books with frayed spines, handmade jewelry, vintage clothing, and tiny trinkets, each one a story waiting to be noticed. She wandered into a small bookstore, the air dense with the smell of old pages and faint perfume. Shelves towered around her, stretching to the ceiling, stacked with stories of lives she could only imagine. She ran her fingers along the spines, feeling the weight of human experience folded into each volume. A young man, seated at a desk near the back, noticed her interest and smiled. "Looking for anything specific?" he asked softly. "No," she replied, "just seeing what's here." He nodded knowingly. Sometimes the stories you stumble upon are the ones you need the most. She moved slowly through the aisles, opening random books, reading paragraphs that spoke to her quietly, weaving their lessons into her own internal tapestry. Hours passed unnoticed, her awareness expanding with each word, each turn of the page. She realized that these stories, these narratives, these glimpses of human existence beyond her own pain, were teaching her something essential, that life moves forward, that people can be both flawed and beautiful, and that she, too, could be beautiful in her own reclaimed way. Eventually, she purchased a few volumes, carrying them carefully as she stepped back into the sunlight, the weight of the books in her arms grounding her while also reminding her of the richness of the world beyond herself. The city streets now seemed different, alive in ways she had forgotten, each passerby a story, each shadow a whisper, each sound a note in the symphony of daily life. She paused at a cafe, ordering tea and a pastry, settling by a window where she could observe without intrusion. People walked past in measured rhythms, conversations floating in the air, the faint sound of music from a nearby shop, the distant barking of a dog, all combined into a cadence she felt in her bones. She wrote in her journal, detailing the morning's journey, the discoveries, the reflections. Each word was a declaration, a brick in the foundation she was rebuilding beneath herself, steady and unshakable. By afternoon, the sunlight had shifted, painting streets in gold and amber, turning ordinary scenes into artful compositions. Leila wandered into a small park she had never truly explored, drawn by the quiet promise of greenery and movement. The gates creaked softly as she entered, the damp earth releasing its scent into the crisp air. Children played in the distance, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves and the gentle hum of the city beyond. She walked along winding paths, gravel crunching beneath her shoes, letting herself be absorbed fully in the environment. Each bench, tree, and fountain became a meditation, each moment an anchor. A man walking his dog passed by, exchanging a brief, polite smile with her. She returned it without hesitation, realizing that human connection no longer demanded expectation, only presence. Sitting on a bench beneath a grand oak tree, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the pulse of life around her, feeling it inside her, too. She imagined her own life expanding into this rhythm, each breath, step, and glance a thread in a tapestry of her making. Time stretched, slowed, and became a companion rather than a measure. She watched the play of shadows across the paths, the delicate interplay of sunlight and foliage, the way a stray leaf drifted lazily to the ground, and felt an unspoken kinship with all things transient yet enduring. In the late afternoon, Leila found herself in front of an art gallery tucked between two cafes, its windows streaked with condensation from the chill in the air. Inside, paintings of abstract emotions, stormy harbors, and quiet cityscapes caught her attention. Each piece seemed to speak to her own evolving understanding of life and loss. A gallery attendant noticed her interest and approached, striking up a quiet conversation about a painting depicting a stormy harbor. Leila listened, contributing cautiously at first, then more openly as the discussion deepened, the words flowing naturally and without the weight of past judgment. She realized that she had been starved for dialogue that was not fraught with tension or obligation. She was learning, slowly, that connection could be gentle, restorative, and unpressured. The gallery's warmth, the soft hum of conversation, and the presence of others who were absorbed in their passion allowed her to inhabit a space of belonging without compromise. As evening fell, she wandered the streets back to her favorite cafe, the amber glow of streetlights reflecting in puddles, casting the city in a warm, ethereal light. She ordered tea and a small dessert, sitting by the window where she could observe the interplay of life and light. She took out her journal and wrote with deliberate care, chronicling the day's discoveries, reflections, and subtle victories. Each word reinforced her sense of autonomy, each paragraph a reminder that she had reclaimed her narrative. She wrote not only of physical exploration but of emotional growth, the quiet confidence that had begun to settle in her bones, the patience she was learning to cultivate, the understanding that healing was not linear but a mosaic of moments like these. By nightfall, she returned home slowly, savoring each step, the cool air brushing against her cheeks, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and flowers from the city parks. At home, she cooked a simple meal, letting the preparation itself become a meditation. She ate slowly, appreciating the act of nurturing herself, feeling each bite as a celebration of survival and self-possession. Later, she sat by the window with tea, watching the city lights shimmer against the darkened streets. She opened her journal again, writing not of loss, but of the reclaiming of space, the crafting of new rituals, the recognition that she could fill her own life with light, beauty, and purpose. Night deepened, and Leila prepared for sleep, reflecting on the slow rhythm of her days. The city hummed softly outside, blending with the distant ticking of her clock. She closed her eyes, feeling her heartbeat steady, her chest full with calm resolve. Sleep came, untroubled by shadows or whispers of past betrayals. Her dreams were filled with streets bathed in sunlight, gardens flourishing in secret courtyards, and quiet, joyful human interactions that reinforced the lesson she was learning. That life was abundant, and she was capable of living fully within it. By the following morning, Leila awoke to a sky streaked with soft pinks and golds, the faint hint of dawn seeping through her curtains. She lingered in bed for a long while, feeling the comforting weight of the sheets, the rhythmic thrum of her own heartbeat steadying her nerves. The apartment was quiet, the city outside stirring gradually, a gentle hum in the distance, the faint roar of engines, the murmur of early pedestrians, and the distant echo of a church bell signaling the new day. Today, she decided, she would explore a part of the city she had always ignored, the old district along the river, where narrow streets twisted unpredictably and buildings bore the history of decades in their bricks and mortar. She dressed slowly, with deliberation, selecting a soft gray sweater and jeans, her green coat draped over her shoulders, worn but comforting. As she walked, she noticed the familiar sense of coffee, damp stone, and blooming flowers intertwining, carrying her deeper into a world she had long overlooked. Along the riverbank, she paused frequently, watching the water catch the morning light, waves rippling softly, reflecting the buildings and the sky like a living painting. Each ripple, each shadow, each faint splash against the dock seemed imbued with significance, reminding her that even small movements could create lasting impact. Children's laughter echoed from a distant playground, dogs barked and played with unrestrained energy, and couples strolled hand in hand along the water, their quiet conversations blending into the symphony of early city life. Leila walked slowly, taking photographs with her phone, not for others, but for herself, capturing shadows, reflections, textures, and fleeting expressions that struck her with beauty. She paused at a small riverside cafe tucked beneath ivy, its windows fogged from warmth and human presence. Inside, the faint scent of pastries mingled with rich coffee, and the murmur of conversation offered a gentle soundtrack to her morning. She ordered tea and settled at a table by the window, observing people as they moved past. A man carrying a violin case, a woman balancing a stack of books, a boy chasing his dog across the cobblestones. Each movement told a story, a brief, beautiful vignette of lives interweaving. Pulling out her journal, she began to write, capturing not only what she saw but the emotions those moments evoked: wonder, nostalgia, quiet delight, and the thrill of discovering small treasures in the ordinary. Time slipped by unnoticed. The morning turned into afternoon as she wandered further along the river, discovering narrow bridges, hidden courtyards, and murals painted decades ago that had faded but retained a stubborn vibrancy. She stopped to sketch a doorway framed in ivy, capturing the curvature of its arch and the peeling paint, noting how decay and beauty often coexisted in perfect harmony. The act of sketching, of committing herself to observation, grounded her in the present more than she had ever realized possible. Later in the afternoon, she came upon a small community garden tucked behind an iron gate, its wooden sign painted in cheerful, fading letters, "The Garden of Forgotten Hands." Inside, the air was alive with the scent of soil, herbs and flowers, and the soft chatter of volunteers tending to the plants. Leila lingered, taking in the vibrant colors of marigolds, the delicate curl of young tomato vines, the rich green of basil and mint. An elderly man noticed her interest and approached with a gentle smile. "Care to help?" he asked, offering her a small trowel. "I'm just looking," she replied, smiling faintly. "But it seems alive, doesn't it?" He nodded. "This garden has been tended by hands that never asked for thanks. Sometimes that's the best way to live, giving and nurturing without expectation." His words resonated deeply. She knelt beside a small patch of soil, brushing her fingers against the earth, feeling its life beneath her nails. She helped plant a few seeds, watered young sprouts, and felt a sense of quiet fulfillment she had not experienced in years. Time in the garden stretched, each movement slow, intentional, meditative. She observed the rhythm of life there, the bees visiting flowers, the sunlight shifting over leaves, the occasional gust of wind carrying petals across the path. The experience grounded her in a way that no city walk or cafe visit could, a tangible connection to the cycles of growth, patience, and quiet strength. When she left, carrying only the memory and the scent of soil on her hands, she felt lighter, her heart steady with the understanding that care, however small, could ripple outward in ways invisible yet profound. By evening, the city lights flickered on, painting streets with gold and amber reflections. Leila wandered through streets she had never noticed, passing small markets, street performers, and cafes spilling laughter onto the sidewalks. She paused at an art installation, a collection of mirrors set into the pavement, reflecting pedestrians' feet as they passed. She crouched to look closer, fascinated by how movement could create ephemeral patterns, reminding her that life was both fragile and fleeting, yet endlessly resilient. A young couple noticed her curiosity and exchanged a quiet laugh with her, and she smiled in return, appreciating the simplicity of shared amusement without obligation. She continued, letting her curiosity guide her, exploring side streets and alleyways, discovering murals, hidden doors, and staircases leading to rooftop gardens she had never imagined. Each discovery was a small triumph, a reminder that the world, like herself, was full of hidden layers, waiting to be uncovered with patience and care. She took photographs, made sketches in her journal, and wrote notes about colors, textures, and fleeting emotions. By the time she returned home, night had settled fully, the city streets quiet, except for distant footsteps, the hum of engines, and occasional laughter. She cooked dinner slowly, appreciating the act as a ritual rather than a chore, savoring each bite and reflecting on the day. Sitting by the window afterward, tea in hand, she opened her journal and wrote for hours, capturing not only the day's events but the sensations, reflections, and emotions that accompanied them. She wrote about discovery, independence, and the subtle joy of being fully present in her own life. The next morning, Leila awoke to the soft cooing of pigeons outside her window, sunlight spilling across her bedspread in warm streams of gold. She dressed carefully, her green coat once again wrapped around her shoulders, and stepped outside, the crisp morning air invigorating her senses. Today, she decided, she would explore the city's library district, a cluster of buildings she had long passed without entering. The streets were quieter in the early hours, the hum of the city softened, and she walked slowly, savoring each sensation, the texture of the pavement under her shoes, the faint smell of wet stone, the distant chatter of people beginning their day. The library district was alive with possibility. Inside, the smell of paper, varnish, and old wood enveloped her like a familiar embrace. She wandered through the towering shelves, letting her hands glide over spines, noticing titles she had never read, authors whose work she had only vaguely heard. A librarian noticed her absorption and whispered a suggestion for a section of rare books. She followed, discovering volumes of poetry, historical journals, and novels with covers so worn they seemed to contain entire lifetimes within their pages. Sitting in a quiet alcove, she opened one of the journals, reading passages filled with emotion, struggle, and beauty. Words that had belonged to strangers suddenly felt intimate, like messages across time, teaching her lessons she had yet to articulate for herself. She sketched in her notebook, capturing the interplay of light through stained glass windows, the curve of wooden shelves, the soft tilt of dust motes dancing in the beams. Each movement, each observation, each word she wrote expanded her awareness, reinforcing the understanding that life was vast, rich, and endlessly layered. Hours passed like minutes, each moment fully lived, and when she finally stepped outside, the sky had turned a soft rose, the air carrying the scent of spring blooms mixed with city stone. She walked slowly back to her apartment, stopping occasionally to photograph shadows, reflections, and subtle textures that spoke to her renewed vision of the world. By late afternoon, Leila found herself walking along streets she had explored before but now viewed with fresh eyes. The golden sunlight slanted between buildings, illuminating textures she had never noticed, the subtle grooves in the brickwork, the worn edges of door frames, the way ivy and moss crept stubbornly over neglected walls. She paused often, letting herself linger, savoring the details that once would have gone unnoticed. A street musician played softly on the corner, his violin producing melodies that twisted around her thoughts, mingling with the soft hum of the city. She stopped, listening, letting each note anchor her in the present, feeling the resonance in her chest like a quiet, reassuring heartbeat. She noticed the pedestrians passing by, not as distractions, but as companions in this shared urban symphony. People brushed past her with hurried steps, umbrellas jostling, children tugging at their parents' hands, couples speaking in hushed tones, each movement a reminder that life continued, independent of her past heartbreaks and current reflections. Leila's journal rested in her bag, a silent companion, and she reached for it intermittently, sketching the violinist's profile, noting the angles of the streets, capturing the light and shadow as it danced across walls and pavement. Her thoughts wandered to Marcus, briefly, but not with longing or anger. Instead, she reflected on lessons learned, the quiet victories of self-possession, the subtle power of reclaiming one's life without revenge, without bitterness. She thought of the boutique, the recording, the law office, each step a necessary passage that had led her here, to a state of calm vigilance and quiet strength. The sun dipped lower, and the streetlights flickered on, casting a warm glow on puddles, signage, and the occasional passerby. Leila paused at a small fountain, watching ripples expand across the water as a bird landed gracefully on the edge. The simplicity of the scene struck her. Life was built from ordinary moments strung together, each small gesture, each step forward, a testament to endurance and renewal. She stood there, feeling a surge of gratitude for the ability to witness, to breathe, to move through a world that now seemed less intimidating, more alive, more intimate. The fountain's water shimmered, reflecting the glow of lamplight, and in that mirrored world, she saw herself, not the woman haunted by betrayal, not the shadow she had been months ago, but someone who had endured, who had reclaimed space, autonomy, and clarity. She lingered, breathing deeply, letting the evening settle over her in gentle layers, and finally walked on, carrying with her the awareness that the city, with all its chaos and rhythm, could also offer solace, beauty, and quiet. Companionship. Night fully descended by the time Leila returned to her apartment. The streets glimmered wet from a passing rain, reflections of neon signs and streetlights sliding like liquid across the pavement. She paused at the corner cafe, ordering a late-night tea and sitting in her favorite window seat. Outside, the world moved in slow waves of light, shadow, and sound. A couple laughed quietly as they shared an umbrella, a stray cat slinked along a fence, and the occasional car passed by, its tires hissing through puddles. She opened her journal again, writing deliberately, her pen tracing thoughts, emotions, observations, and reflections from the day. She captured the subtle triumphs of independence, the quiet joy of noticing, the calm exhilaration of inhabiting her life fully. Marcus lingered in her mind only as a distant echo, no longer a wound, merely a reminder of her resilience. She sipped her tea slowly, feeling its warmth spread through her chest, settling her nerves, and she allowed herself to reflect on her journey, the pain, the betrayal, the long process of disentangling herself from a life that no longer served her. Each paragraph she wrote was a reclamation of space, a declaration of selfhood, a quiet testament to endurance. By the time she returned home, the city had fallen into near silence, the occasional honk of a car or a distant laugh punctuating the quiet. She cooked a modest dinner, appreciating the act as a ritual, a meditation, a way to nurture herself fully without expectation or obligation. Sitting by the window afterward, the city lights reflected in her teacup, and she felt the weight of solitude shift from loneliness to a kind of sacred peace. She opened the journal one last time for the night, writing a final passage, a recognition of her journey, the acknowledgement of strength born from hardship, and the quiet excitement of a life reclaimed. Sleep came gently, uninterrupted, her dreams filled not with shadows of betrayal but with streets she had walked, people she had observed, and the quiet power of her own presence. The next morning arrived with the pale light of dawn, brushing softly across rooftops and streets. Leila dressed slowly, deliberately, savoring the sensation of fabric against her skin, the gentle weight of her coat, the firmness of her shoes grounding her steps. She had decided today to take a train to the outskirts of the city, to explore neighborhoods she had only glimpsed from afar. Each street, each building, each fragment of life offered new textures, colors, and stories. On the platform, the train rattled beneath her feet, a rhythmic hum that echoed her heartbeat, and as she boarded, she chose a window seat, watching the city blur past in soft streaks of color, lights, and motion. The rhythm of the train soothed her, the gentle sway of motion connecting her to a larger current of life, and she felt simultaneously present and attached, observing without attachment, witnessing without judgment. Along the journey, she noted small details: a child pressing a palm against the window, the anxious glance of a commuter reading the morning news, the subtle play of sunlight across buildings, casting shadows that shifted with the passing time. Each observation, each note, each reflection became a meditation, a way to inhabit the world fully while remaining centered within herself. At her destination, she wandered slowly through streets lined with small shops, parks, and cafes, letting curiosity guide her rather than schedule or plan. She paused frequently, sketching, photographing, and noting her impressions, discovering a quiet joy in observing life that had eluded her during years of stress, betrayal, and routine. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of distant trees, baked bread, and wet earth, mingling to create a fragrance uniquely tied to this exploration. She walked for hours, letting her intuition lead her through narrow alleys, hidden gardens, and sunlit courtyards, each moment reinforcing her understanding that life, when fully witnessed and engaged with, could be both expansive and deeply personal. By the time she returned to the train, evening had arrived, painting the world in amber, gold, and deepening blue, the reflections of buildings shimmering in puddles left by a passing rain. She boarded, settling into her seat with a sense of quiet accomplishment, feeling the rhythm of the tracks beneath her feet like a heartbeat connecting her to both the city she had left and the home she would return to. That evening, back in her apartment, Leila reflected on the journey she had undertaken over the past days. The journal lay open, pages filled with sketches, words, observations, and reflections. Each entry was a marker of growth, of attention, of conscious living. She brewed tea and settled by the window, watching the city awaken in the glow of streetlights and shop windows. Shadows danced across the walls, reflecting the quiet rhythm of life beyond her apartment. She allowed herself to feel the depth of her independence, the fullness of her presence, and the strength she had cultivated through intentional observation, exploration, and reflection. She thought briefly of Marcus, not with longing or resentment, but with acknowledgement that he had been part of the process that had led her to this newfound clarity. She reflected on the quiet victories of her days, noticing beauty, engaging with strangers, exploring neighborhoods, and nurturing herself with care and attention. She wrote in her journal for hours, capturing both external details and internal insights, weaving together the physical and emotional landscapes she had traversed. The act of writing became a ritual of reclamation, each stroke of the pen a tangible proof of her presence and power. Night deepened, and she prepared for sleep with a sense of completion, of wholeness, of quiet joy. The city hummed softly outside, a distant accompaniment to the rhythm she now carried within herself, steady, measured, and entirely her own. The following morning, Leila awoke to the faint hum of the city filtered through her curtains. Light streamed across the floor in soft golden ribbons, highlighting the subtle dust particles that danced lazily in the air, like tiny fragments of forgotten memories. She stretched slowly, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders and spine from the previous day's long walks and explorations, yet each twinge of fatigue was now tinged with satisfaction rather than stress. Rising, she walked to the window, letting her eyes drink in the city's awakening. Vendors opening stalls, shop doors creaking as owners arrange their displays, and the distant echo of early traffic threading a rhythm through the streets. Today, she decided she would venture farther, beyond the familiar neighborhoods, to places she had only ever seen from the train windows, streets that hinted at history in the faded paint of buildings, in rusted gates, and uneven cobblestones. She dressed in layers, comfortable yet practical, and draped her green coat over her shoulders as she stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of rain mixed with the warmth of baking bread from a nearby bakery. With each step, she felt the city's pulse beneath her feet, the vibrations of life threading through the sidewalks, up into her being, affirming her presence in a world that had previously felt foreign and intimidating. She paused at a small fountain tucked into a quiet square, watching the ripples expand across the water as a bird skimmed the surface. The reflection of the buildings shimmered and fractured, reminding her of the fractured life she had inherited from months of betrayal, and yet now the water's rhythm seemed to promise repair, a quiet reminder that movement, persistence, and patience could restore even what seemed broken. Leila wandered along the narrow streets, letting the architecture guide her. The facades of old buildings leaned slightly, their bricks pitted with age, yet alive with character. Small balconies were overgrown with ivy, and rusted lanterns hung from brackets, like silent sentinels. Every door seemed to whisper stories, each window a secret fragment of someone else's life. She stopped often, crouching to sketch details in her notebook: a wrought iron latch, the curve of a gate, the texture of peeling paint. She noticed small gardens tucked behind iron fences, a single rose blooming stubbornly among weeds, and felt a kinship with their quiet resilience. The streets twisted unpredictably, guiding her like a maze designed to slow her down and force her to notice, to breathe, to live fully in each moment. She watched as an elderly man carried a basket of vegetables from a small market, nodding politely to a neighbor as they exchanged a brief, knowing smile. The simplicity of the interaction struck her with profound significance. Life was composed of these tiny, ordinary gestures that, when observed closely, became extraordinary in their ability to connect humans, to create shared spaces, to weave invisible threads of existence. Eventually, she reached a small riverside park, where the morning sunlight played on the water, scattering reflections like glittering shards. Children ran past her, their laughter pure and unself-conscious, reminding her of the unfiltered joy that life could offer. A couple strolled nearby, their hands brushing briefly, a reminder that connection was both delicate and powerful. Leila sat on a bench beneath a tree, closing her eyes, letting the sounds of life, the gentle rustling of leaves, the soft splash of the river, the murmur of conversation, seep into her consciousness. She reflected on her own journey, the months of emotional turmoil, the quiet reclamation of autonomy, and the deliberate steps she had taken to anchor herself in reality, in experience, in the tangible flow of life. She realized that her independence was not simply a shield against betrayal, but a canvas upon which she could paint her own narrative, one defined not by the actions of others, but by her own choices, her own rhythm, her own resilience. Hours passed like moments as she wandered, sketching, photographing, and jotting notes in her journal. Each encounter, each observation, was catalogued with care, becoming a record of her emergence from shadow into clarity. By afternoon, she entered a small cafe she had passed countless times without noticing, drawn in by the warmth and muted chatter inside. The air smelled of roasted coffee, sugar, and faint perfume, grounding her senses and offering comfort. She ordered tea and a small pastry, settling at a corner table where she could observe without intrusion. Outside, the streets glimmered with recent rain, pedestrians moving with umbrellas in varying rhythms, reflections shimmering across the cobblestones. Leila wrote for hours, documenting observations of human behavior, small gestures, and fleeting moments of beauty. She reflected on how each observation reinforced her autonomy, the ability to witness life fully, to inhabit it without fear or obligation, and to carry her presence as a quiet declaration of selfhood. The act of writing became meditative, each word both an anchor and a bridge, connecting the inner landscape of her mind with the external world in a harmonious dance. As evening fell, the city transformed. Lights flickered on, painting streets in warm amber and soft gold. The windows of shops glowed like tiny beacons, drawing people into their intimacy. Leila wandered through streets she had never noticed before, discovering murals painted decades ago, staircases leading to rooftop gardens, and narrow alleys where shadows played like sentient beings. She paused at a fountain in a small square, watching water ripple in response to the faint breeze. Each reflection of streetlights on the surface seemed symbolic. Life was not linear, nor predictable, yet it flowed continuously, adjusting to the obstacles and curves it encountered. She felt a quiet sense of communion with the city, a recognition that she was part of its rhythm while maintaining her distinct identity, her unique path. Her green coat, worn and comforting, seemed to act as a protective layer against the world's chaos, grounding her in a sense of security she had not known for months. Night deepened as she returned home, streets now quiet except for distant laughter, footsteps, and the soft hum of cars passing by. Leila prepared a modest dinner, savoring each bite, appreciating the ritual of nurturing herself. Afterward, she sat by the window, tea in hand, the city lights reflected in the cup's surface. She opened her journal and wrote of the day, the streets explored, the moments observed, the insights discovered. Each line was a testament to endurance, curiosity, and the deliberate cultivation of autonomy. She thought of Marcus only briefly, as a ghost of the past, acknowledging the pain he had caused but not allowing it to dominate her present. Sleep came gently, her dreams imbued with streets she had wandered, soft reflections, and quiet triumphs. The following morning, Leila awoke with the city bathed in a pale golden light. Today, she decided, she would explore a local market known for its artisanal crafts and rare ingredients. Each stall was a sensory feast. Fabrics dyed in vivid colors, spices releasing fragrant plumes, handmade jewelry glinting in the sunlight. She lingered at each stall, examining details, asking questions, and allowing herself to immerse fully in the experience. She purchased a small hand-woven basket, appreciating the care with which it had been made. Each transaction, each interaction, became a deliberate exercise in mindfulness and presence, reinforcing her understanding that life's richness could be found in observation, engagement, and appreciation. By late afternoon, she wandered to a nearby riverbank, watching the gentle sway of boats and the glint of sunlight on the water. Families picnicked along the shore, couples strolled, and solitary figures sat in quiet reflection. Leila found a secluded spot and opened her journal, writing freely, her words capturing not just the physical scenery but the profound emotional currents she was learning to navigate. She realized that freedom was not merely escaping the past but inhabiting the present fully, cultivating attention, and creating meaning in each moment. Hours passed unnoticed, the light shifting from gold to soft violet as evening approached. By nightfall, she returned home, carrying with her a sense of completion and fulfillment. She prepared a simple dinner, brewed tea, and settled by the window with her journal, reflecting on the past days, the streets she had wandered, and the subtle victories she had claimed. She felt a deep, abiding calm, a recognition that she had reclaimed her narrative, her presence, and her life. Marcus lingered only as a distant memory, no longer capable of shaping her emotional terrain. Sleep arrived gently, wrapping her in quiet assurance as the city hummed softly beyond her walls, a rhythm she now felt intimately connected to. The next morning, Leila woke with a clarity she had not felt in months. The city outside her window was bathed in soft, diffused light, and she allowed herself to linger, listening to the distant hum of early traffic, the cooing of pigeons, and the occasional bark of a dog. Today, she decided, she would explore the historic district at the edge of town, where old brick buildings leaned against one another like weary companions and narrow streets wound unpredictably, hiding courtyards and small gardens behind weathered gates. She dressed in her familiar green coat, now softened from wear, and layered a scarf around her neck, the fabric brushing against her skin with a comforting familiarity. She stepped outside, inhaling the crisp air deeply, letting it fill her lungs and steady her thoughts. Each step she took felt deliberate, measured, and full of intent, as if walking itself were a meditation, a ritual of presence and awareness. As she entered the historic district, the buildings seemed to exhale history through every brick and window frame. Faded murals told stories of decades long past. Iron railings creaked under the weight of age, and wooden doors, chipped and warped, carried the echoes of countless comings and goings. Leila paused frequently, sketching the details in her notebook, capturing the way light fell across textured walls, how ivy crawled stubbornly over the corners of stone, and how shadows bent in intricate patterns along narrow alleyways. Each observation was a lesson, a reminder that beauty often exists in small, overlooked details, waiting only for an attentive eye. She noticed small gardens tucked behind gates, roses blooming wildly amidst weeds, their fragrance carried on a gentle breeze. Kneeling, she traced a finger along the edge of a flower petal, feeling the delicate vibration of life. The act of noticing, of truly inhabiting the present, brought a quiet joy she had forgotten existed, a satisfaction that no amount of revenge or confrontation could have ever given her. Leila wandered further into the labyrinthine streets, eventually discovering a small artisan's workshop tucked beneath a low archway. The windows were fogged, and the faint smell of wood and paint beckoned her inside. A man, perhaps in his 50s, looked up from a table cluttered with tools and materials. His hands were calloused, his expression calm, yet attentive. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice carrying a warmth that contrasted the quiet intensity of the streets outside. She smiled faintly. "I'm just looking," she replied. But as she stepped further into the workshop, she realized the space was alive with stories, both in the materials and in the man's careful movements. She watched him carve intricate patterns into wood, noting the precision and care in every stroke. Each curve, each detail, seemed deliberate, meditative, and meaningful, a tangible manifestation of focus, patience, and dedication. Leila felt a kinship with the process, recognizing parallels in her own life. The slow, deliberate reconstruction of herself, the careful nurturing of autonomy and strength. Hours passed unnoticed in the workshop, Leila observing, sketching, and occasionally asking questions about the techniques and materials. She purchased a small, intricately carved wooden box, appreciating both the craftsmanship and the story it carried within its patterns. Stepping outside, she noticed how the sun had moved across the buildings, casting shadows that shifted with gentle imperceptibility. The streets were quieter now, the bustle of midday replaced by a serene calm, and Leila allowed herself to wander without plan or direction, simply observing, breathing, and noting. A stray cat slinked past, pausing to regard her with cautious curiosity, and she crouched, offering a tentative hand. The cat approached, brushing against her coat, a reminder that trust and connection could emerge slowly, with patience and presence. By evening, the city had transformed. Streetlights flickered to life, their warm glow reflecting off damp pavement, and shop windows illuminated the sidewalks with golden light. Leila paused at a small fountain in a square she had passed without noticing before. Water rippled gently across its surface, and the reflections of surrounding buildings shimmered, creating fractured, ephemeral images that reminded her of the fluidity of life. Children ran past her, their laughter bright and unself-conscious. Couples strolled hand in hand, and solitary figures paused on benches, reading or simply watching. Leila felt a quiet kinship with the world around her, understanding that life's richness came not from grand gestures, but from the deliberate observation and immersion in small, fleeting moments. She lingered, allowing herself to exist fully in the space, her heart steady, her mind clear. Returning home, She prepared a simple dinner and brewed tea, savoring each bite, each sip, as if it were a meditation in its own right. She sat by the window afterward, journal open, recording the day's observations, sketches, and reflections. She wrote of the quiet triumphs of independence, the beauty of attentive observation, and the power of reclaiming her own narrative. Marcus lingered in her mind only as a shadow, a reminder of what had been, yet powerless to intrude on her present. She reflected on the lessons she had learned: patience, presence, resilience, and the profound clarity that comes from observing life without expectation or distraction. Sleep arrived gently, uninterrupted, filled with dreams of winding streets, shimmering reflections, and whispered possibilities. The next day, she awoke with a sense of excitement, a curiosity that pulled her toward the outskirts of the city, where older buildings and neglected parks awaited rediscovery. She dressed carefully, layering her green coat, scarf, and gloves, stepping into the crisp air with intention. Today, she would explore spaces forgotten by most: empty courtyards, overgrown gardens, abandoned train stations, places where the passage of time was tangible, where life had ebbed and flowed in cycles, leaving both scars and beauty. Each street she walked revealed new textures, shapes, and stories. Rusted gates opened onto hidden courtyards where wildflowers had claimed their space amidst cracked stone. She sketched, photographed, and noted, letting her senses absorb the details, the sounds, the fragrances, and the play of light and shadow. The world was alive with subtle rhythms: the wind brushing through leaves, the faint trickle of water from a broken fountain, the creak of old wood in buildings long abandoned. In these quiet, overlooked spaces, Leila felt a kinship with the past, an acknowledgement that life's passage left traces, lessons, and beauty in unexpected corners. By late afternoon, she stumbled upon a small cafe tucked into an alley, its windows fogged and lights dim, but the faint scent of baked bread and coffee inviting. Inside, a handful of patrons spoke quietly, their voices a soft hum in the background. She ordered tea and a slice of cake, sitting by the window to watch the interplay of light, shadow, and human motion outside. Here, she observed the rhythms of life once again: a mother adjusting her child's coat, a young man offering his seat to an elderly woman, the delicate laughter of friends sharing stories. Each moment was a small miracle, a reminder that even amidst betrayal, disappointment, and chaos, life continued with grace, humor, and beauty. The following morning, Leila awoke to a soft drizzle tapping against her window, the city wrapped in a gentle gray mist that softened edges and muted sounds. She lingered for a moment, letting the rain's rhythm seep into her consciousness, feeling it both as a comfort and as a signal of renewal. Today, she resolved, she would explore the small art galleries tucked into side streets she had always passed in haste, unaware of their quiet treasures. Dressing in her green coat, she grabbed an umbrella, but let the drizzle dampen her hair slightly, enjoying the sensation of the rain kissing her cheeks, grounding her in the moment. Stepping outside, she felt the city's pulse altered by the rain, each step against wet pavement echoing softly, reflecting light and shadow in ways that seemed to create a subtle theater of her own. The galleries she discovered were intimate, filled with paintings, sketches, and sculptures that spoke of human emotion, struggle, and triumph. Leila moved slowly through each space, absorbing the details, letting colors and forms resonate within her. A painting of a storm-tossed sea caught her attention, the tumultuous waves captured with such force that she felt a kinship with the artist's expression of chaos and resilience. She sketched the piece in her notebook, not to replicate it, but to capture the emotional imprint it left on her. Each gallery visit became a meditation, an exercise in observing, feeling, and cataloging the small revelations hidden within the artistry of others. Leila noticed the way sunlight filtered through skylights, illuminating dust motes and textures, turning ordinary spaces into ephemeral spectacles. She lingered in the quiet corners, listening to the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional murmur of admiration, finding in these moments a sense of connection to lives beyond her own. Hours passed as she moved from gallery to gallery, occasionally pausing to speak with artists or curators, learning the inspiration behind each piece. The conversations were gentle, unhurried, and full of subtle insights, reinforcing her understanding that connection did not require grand gestures. It could exist in curiosity, attention, and the sharing of observations. In one small gallery, a young sculptor demonstrated the technique behind a delicate wire figure, explaining how each twist and bend represented both fragility and resilience. Leila felt a reflection of her own life in the figure, once bent and fragile, yet reshaped, strengthened, and capable of holding form with intention. She purchased a small sculpture, simple yet evocative, and carried it carefully, knowing it would be a tangible reminder of her continued evolution. By afternoon, the rain had lessened, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Leila wandered into a quiet courtyard she had never noticed before. Ivy crept along the walls, and the faint smell of wet earth mixed with the scent of nearby cafes. A fountain in the center gurgled quietly, its water forming tiny arcs that caught the fading light. She sat on the edge, sketchbook open, and began recording impressions of the courtyard, the way the water moved, the play of shadows across the walls, the subtle chatter of distant conversations. Each moment became a thread weaving together the textures of experience, grounding her in the active presence. Even in solitude, she felt connected to the city, to its inhabitants, to life itself, moving and unfolding in rhythms she had only recently begun to perceive. Evening arrived gradually, the city glowing under amber streetlights. Leila decided to walk toward a small bridge she had spotted from afar, the silhouette of its ironwork cutting across the darkening sky. Below, the river reflected the city's lights like a liquid tapestry. She leaned against the railing, feeling the cool metal beneath her hands, watching the water flow endlessly beneath her. The scene brought a sense of clarity, of perspective, as if the river carried away the residue of the past months, betrayal, pain, uncertainty, leaving only the essential truth of her presence. People passed in pairs or alone, their movements a subtle dance of life intersecting with hers, yet she felt no need to merge with their trajectories. Her existence was full, sufficient, complete in its own rhythm. Later, back in her apartment, she unpacked the small purchases from the day, a sculpture, sketches, a hand-carved box, arranging them in corners where light would highlight their textures and presence. She brewed tea, the aroma mingling with the faint scent of rain lingering in the room. Sitting by the window with her journal, she reflected on the day's discoveries, the subtle joys, the lessons of observation, and the quiet victories of independence. She wrote, "The world is vast, its stories innumerable, yet each step taken intentionally reveals layers invisible to the distracted eye." Marcus lingered as a distant echo, a memory that no longer dictated her emotional space. She realized that life, like the river outside, continued to flow, offering new paths, new encounters, and new possibilities. The night was calm, the rain replaced by a faint breeze rustling the leaves outside. Leila allowed herself a moment of reflection before sleep, recognizing the significance of her journey, not simply survival after betrayal, but the active cultivation of presence, attention, and self-trust. Her dreams were vivid yet serene, populated with the streets, alleys, courtyards, and galleries she had explored, each a manifestation of her growing autonomy. She woke the next day with a quiet excitement, ready to explore further, to continue observing, recording, and inhabiting her own story with deliberate intention. The following morning, Leila awoke to the faint glow of sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting soft streaks across her floor. She stretched slowly, feeling the familiar ache in her shoulders and back from yesterday's long walks, but the fatigue carried a sense of purpose rather than burden. Today, she resolved to explore the city's hidden gardens, spaces tucked behind high walls or down narrow alleyways that she had only glimpsed from the corner of her eye on past walks. Dressing in her green coat, scarf loosely wrapped around her neck, she stepped outside, the morning air crisp and tinged with the faint scent of damp earth from the previous day's rain. With each step, she felt the rhythm of the city beneath her, the subtle vibrations of life in motion, a cadence that reminded her that she was no longer merely moving through the world. She was present, fully engaged, and alive in a way she had forgotten. Her first discovery was a small courtyard tucked behind a brick building, the entrance almost invisible beneath the curling tendrils of ivy. The garden was a hidden oasis. Wildflowers erupted in a riot of colors, a small fountain gurgled quietly, and the sound of birdsong echoed softly off the surrounding walls. She wandered slowly, noticing the way sunlight fractured through leaves, creating moving patterns across the stone paths. She knelt by a patch of lavender, inhaling its faint fragrance, and sketched its delicate structure in her notebook. Each movement was deliberate, measured, a way of grounding herself in the present. Here, in this quiet, overlooked corner of the city, Leila felt the past month's tension dissolve, replaced by a calm awareness of beauty, rhythm, and the resilience of life that persists even in neglected spaces. After lingering in the garden, Leila continued wandering, discovering more hidden courtyards, each with its own distinct personality. One contained a small stone bench, weathered and cracked, positioned beneath an arching magnolia tree. She sat for a long while, watching the way sunlight shimmered through the branches, noticing the minute interplay of shadows across the ground. A stray cat appeared, moving gracefully among the fallen petals, brushing past her leg before disappearing into the foliage. She smiled softly, appreciating the small yet profound moments of life intersecting with her own. In these quiet explorations, she found a sense of communion with the world, a realization that connection did not require the presence of others' approval, that existence itself, observed and honored, could provide a sense of belonging. By mid-morning, she arrived at a larger park, where families and joggers had begun populating the open spaces. Children's laughter echoed across the lawns, dogs bounded freely, and couples strolled hand in hand. Leila found a secluded bench near a small pond, where the water's surface reflected clouds and the distant silhouettes of trees. She opened her journal, letting her pen move freely across the pages, recording observations, thoughts, and fleeting emotions. She wrote about the contrast between the quiet courtyards she had discovered earlier and the vibrant energy of the park, noting how both contributed to her understanding of balance, the necessity of solitude and reflection alongside the rhythm and vitality of shared life. Each word became a meditation, a tangible representation of her evolving self-awareness. Hours passed as she continued her explorations, moving through the park and beyond, following the subtle signs of urban life, a path of worn stone, the scent of fresh bread wafting from a nearby bakery, the soft murmur of conversation from open cafe doors. She paused often, sketching the architecture of old buildings, the textures of peeling paint, and the patterns of rust on wrought iron fences. Every detail she recorded served as a thread weaving her inner narrative with the external world, each observation reinforcing her growing autonomy, resilience, and clarity of mind. Even the simplest encounters, a passerby offering a brief smile, a vendor arranging fruits meticulously, became rich with significance, evidence that life persisted in small, meaningful gestures. As afternoon turned toward evening, Leila wandered into a narrow alleyway that led to a hidden artist cooperative. The interior smelled faintly of paint, wood, and varnish. Canvases leaned against walls, sculptures stood in quiet repose, and soft music hummed from a small corner. Artists moved about, their expressions focused yet relaxed, each absorbed in creation. Leila spent hours there, watching their hands shape, mold, and color, marveling at the dedication and intentionality behind every stroke. She sketched and took notes, capturing not only visual details but the essence of discipline, patience, and presence that each artist embodied. Here, she felt a reflection of her own journey, the careful, deliberate rebuilding of her life, each step, each observation, each choice a small act of creation. By nightfall, the streets glimmered under soft amber lights, and Leila allowed herself to wander without direction, absorbing the city's nighttime rhythm. Reflections from shop windows shimmered on the wet pavement, casting patterns that danced with the motion of passing pedestrians. She paused often, observing the subtle interactions, a couple laughing softly in the distance, a solitary figure pausing to light a cigarette, a delivery driver maneuvering a cart along the narrow sidewalks. Each moment was imbued with significance, a reminder that life's depths could be found not only in monumental events, but in the interplay of ordinary lives observed with attentiveness. Returning home, she prepared a simple dinner, savoring each bite in quiet contemplation. She brewed tea and settled by the window, journal open, recording reflections, insights, and subtle triumphs of the day. Marcus appeared in her thoughts only fleetingly, a shadow she acknowledged without attachment. She recognized that her presence, her observation, and her attention to the rhythms of life were more powerful than any lingering bitterness or desire for retribution. Sleep came gently that night, filled with visions of gardens, courtyards, artist studios, and the city's shifting light, each image a testament to growth, resilience, and the deliberate cultivation of autonomy. Leila awoke to a muted dawn, the sky painted in soft hues of lavender and rose, the city still quiet beneath the gentle stirrings of morning. She lingered in bed for a few moments, savoring the rare calm, before rising deliberately, stretching her arms wide and feeling the muscles in her back release the tension that had been building over months of suppressed worry and grief. Today, she decided, she would explore the outskirts of the city, a neighborhood she had never ventured into, where old warehouses had been converted into lofts, cafes, and creative spaces. She dressed carefully, choosing layers that were comfortable yet allowed her to move freely, slipping into her worn green coat that had become a second skin, a talisman of resilience and self-possession. The streets here were markedly different from the historic district or the bustling downtown. Pavement cracked unevenly beneath her feet, graffiti-adorned walls in vibrant, chaotic patterns, and the hum of distant machinery blended with the occasional bark of a dog or the honk of a truck. There was a rough beauty here, an honesty that did not need polish or presentation. Leila paused often, sketching the jagged lines of walls, the interplay of shadows across metal gates, the texture of rust on corrugated steel. She noticed the contrasts, delicate wildflowers growing through cracks in the concrete, a single bicycle leaning precariously against a brightly painted wall, the scent of baking bread wafting from a cafe tucked into a converted warehouse. Each observation grounded her in the moment, reminding her that life persisted in forms both fragile and resilient. As she wandered further, she discovered a community garden nestled between two old buildings, its existence hinted at only by a small, hand-painted sign. Inside, volunteers tended rows of vegetables, herbs, and flowers, their movements careful and purposeful. She lingered at the edge, observing quietly, sketchbook in hand. An older man tending tomatoes noticed her interest and nodded, offering a warm smile. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly. She nodded, returning his smile, feeling the ease of connection without expectation. The garden was alive not just with plants but with intention, care, and community, a quiet testament to human diligence and hope. Leila walked among the rows, inhaling the rich, earthy scent of soil and vegetation, noting the delicate resilience required to nurture life in a city that often seemed indifferent. Hours passed unnoticed as she explored further, entering small galleries and studios hidden within converted industrial spaces. She watched artists paint, sculpt, and photograph, each absorbed in their craft. One young woman demonstrated weaving techniques, her fingers moving with precision and grace, transforming threads into intricate patterns. Leila watched for a long while, taking notes, sketching, and reflecting on the parallels between the artist's dedication and her own ongoing process of reclaiming autonomy and trust in herself. Every creation around her felt like a metaphor for her life. Even in chaos and imperfection, beauty could emerge, resilience could persist, and meaning could be found in deliberate, mindful action. By mid-afternoon, she paused at a small cafe tucked into a corner, where the sunlight poured in through tall windows. She ordered tea and a pastry, sitting by the window to observe the ebb and flow of the neighborhood. Delivery bikes sped past, pedestrians moved in hurried or leisurely rhythms, and small conversations floated through the air. Leila opened her journal and began writing, reflections on the streets she had walked, the gardens she had seen, the people she had encountered. She wrote about resilience, observation, and the quiet power of being fully present in one's own life. Marcus remained a distant shadow in her thoughts, occasionally surfacing but powerless to disturb her focus or peace. Here, she realized, she was building a life that no longer relied on anyone else's validation or fidelity, a life she could inhabit fully, with intention and awareness. Evening approached, and the sky shifted to a deep indigo, the city lights flickering on like stars brought down to the streets. Leila walked slowly along a river walk she had discovered by accident, the water reflecting the soft glow of street lamps and the silhouettes of passing pedestrians. The rhythm of the flowing river below mirrored the continuity of her own life, ever moving, sometimes turbulent, but ultimately carrying her forward. She paused on a small bridge, leaning against the cool metal railing, breathing in the crisp night air and watching the reflections ripple with the water's movement. In that quiet, suspended moment, she felt the full weight and freedom of her independence, the clarity of her vision for her future, and the peace of being untethered from the betrayals and expectations of the past. Returning home, she prepared a simple dinner, moving through the tasks with deliberate care. The sounds of cooking, the aroma of herbs and roasted vegetables, and the tactile satisfaction of chopping and stirring became a ritual of grounding. Sitting by the window afterward, tea in hand, she wrote in her journal, summarizing the lessons of the day. Resilience is cultivated quietly, freedom is experienced in deliberate choice, and beauty exists in moments we take the time to observe. Sleep arrived naturally, filled with dreams of streets, gardens, studios, and river reflections, a tapestry of her evolving life. Leila woke slowly, the first light of dawn spilling across her bedroom in soft golden streaks. The city outside was waking, but inside, she allowed herself the rare luxury of stillness. She sat by the window for several moments, sipping tea, letting the quiet seep into her bones. The months that had followed the revelation of Marcus's betrayal had been filled with walking, observing, sketching, reflecting, and slowly reclaiming herself. Now, as she looked out over the streets, the rooftops, and the awakening people, she felt something she had not felt in years: completeness. Not triumph, not revenge, not even forgiveness, just a quiet, unshakable presence in her own life. She dressed with care, choosing her soft green coat, scarf, and comfortable shoes. Today was not a day for errands, or for confronting the past, but for herself. She decided to revisit the places that had given her solace over the past weeks, the hidden gardens, the artist studios, the quiet cafes where she had written, observed, and healed. Walking through the city, she noticed things that once would have passed her by. The careful arrangement of fruit in a street vendor's stall, a child pausing to watch pigeons feed on the square, the delicate curve of ironwork on an old balcony. Each detail, once insignificant, now spoke to her of life's persistence and beauty. By midday, she reached the riverwalk where she had paused weeks ago. The water glistened in the sunlight, carrying reflections of clouds, passing boats, and the occasional bird dipping into its surface. She walked along the edge, notebook in hand, recording thoughts and sketches. The act of observation had become not just a tool for distraction, but a practice of presence. She reflected on the journey that had begun with betrayal and heartbreak, realizing that every step, every deliberate act of noticing and creating, had slowly carved away the residue of anger and sadness. She was lighter now, not because the past had disappeared, but because she had chosen to move beyond its power over her. Later, she stopped at a small cafe tucked into a quiet alley. She ordered tea and a slice of cake, sitting by the window, and watched life continue around her. A young couple laughed softly, a man read a newspaper, a child pressed her face to the glass as a dog walked past. Leila felt a sense of harmony with the world, a recognition that her life, though once fractured, had become something deliberate, intentional, and wholly her own. She wrote in her journal, a habit she had nurtured over months, reflecting on resilience, independence, and the quiet power of living fully in the present. In the early evening, she returned home, carrying with her a small painting she had purchased from an emerging artist earlier that week. The painting, vibrant with color and life, seemed to symbolize her own journey, from shadows and betrayal into light and creation. She placed it carefully on the wall in her living room, allowing its presence to transform the space, just as her experiences had transformed her interior life. The apartment, once heavy with silence and memories of Marcus, now felt alive and welcoming, filled with objects and reminders of her own choices, her own discoveries, her own strength. Night arrived quietly, with the city lights flickering like distant stars. Leila prepared dinner slowly, savoring the tactile and sensory experience of cooking for herself. She ate with calm attention, reflecting on the years she had spent trying to hold together a life that had not served her, versus the life she was building now. Each bite, each movement, each conscious decision reinforced the reality that she was capable, complete, and deserving of her own care and attention. The night stretched on in serenity, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to fall asleep fully, without lingering shadows of regret or pain. The next days unfolded with deliberate rhythm. Leila explored the city more fully, meeting people who inspired her, discovering small wonders, and immersing herself in creative work she had once abandoned. She attended workshops, learned new skills, and began sharing her sketches and observations in small exhibitions. Each act of creation and interaction reminded her that life offered opportunities not only to survive but to flourish. Slowly, she began mentoring younger artists and writers, sharing her insights and inspiring others to observe, create, and reclaim their lives from their own shadows. One afternoon, she received an unexpected message. A small envelope slipped under her door and signed. Inside, a note read only, "Meet me at the Riverside Cafe. I have something to explain." Leila paused, curiosity tempered with calm. She had long since released Marcus's hold over her emotions. Yet, she recognized the importance of closure, understanding the final threads of the past before moving fully forward. She went to the cafe, seating herself at a quiet corner, observing the world around her. The man who approached was a former colleague of Marcus's, someone who had witnessed the schemes and manipulations she had endured. He explained details of what had transpired, each revelation reinforcing what she already knew, but clarifying nuances she had not anticipated. She listened with steady patience, recording mental notes not for anger or revenge, but for understanding, ensuring that the past no longer had the power to control her present. By the time the conversation concluded, Leila felt a sense of completion. The threads of betrayal, deceit, and confusion that had entangled her life were untangled. She walked back along the riverwalk, the sun setting in gold and orange hues across the water. Each step was deliberate, a silent affirmation of autonomy, resilience, and clarity. She realized that life would continue to present challenges, that people would disappoint, and that moments of sorrow might still appear, but she now possessed the capacity to face them fully, with calm, grace, and self-possession. Weeks later, she hosted a small exhibition in a local gallery, showcasing her sketches, observations, and creations inspired by her months of exploration. Friends, fellow artists, and curious strangers wandered through the space, pausing to observe, comment, and reflect. Leila moved among them with quiet confidence, engaging in conversations, offering insight, and witnessing the effect of her work on others. In those interactions, she recognized the fullness of her journey. She had transformed not only herself, but had inspired and connected with the world around her. In the final scene of her story, Leila walked along the riverside at dawn, the air crisp and clear, the city slowly awakening. She paused, taking in the reflections of light across the water, the distant silhouettes of buildings, and the gentle movement of life around her. She realized that the journey that began with betrayal and pain had led her to a life defined by attention, presence, creativity, and resilience. Marcus's betrayal no longer held power over her. It was merely a chapter in a story that she had fully reclaimed. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight and freedom of her own life. The green coat around her shoulders, worn but cherished, symbolized her journey, endurance, healing, and the quiet triumph of choosing oneself. The river continued to flow, the city moved around her, and she walked forward with intention, curiosity, and unwavering calm, ready to inhabit the life she had deliberately created, fully and without fear.